All right, I'm sure all of us have heard multiple terms like male chauvinism, toxic masculinity, mansplaining, and there's a host of other things. But increasingly, the left and the liberal elite, they've been demoralizing and even demonizing men who show any signs of strength whatsoever. And as a result, men these days are much less willing, it seems, to take a stand up or to step out. And as a result, quite frankly, we have weaker men. For crying out loud, we even have men these days who think they're women. And that type of thing leads to a plethora of consequences, as we are certainly witnessing through our society. So what's behind all of this? And where is this going to lead us if we continue down this path? Well, joining me now to talk about this is Dr. Owen Strachan. He's the author of a new book, The War on Men, Why Society Hates Them and Why We Need Them. In addition to being a senior fellow at the Family Research Council Center for Biblical Worldview, he's also a provost and research professor of theology at Grace Bible Theological Seminary. Owen, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to have you.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you. I appreciate it.
Well, let's just begin. There's so much happening these days with men, but just kind of hone in for us. What inspired you to write this book and why now?
Yeah, fundamentally, recognizing that men today are called toxic, as you alluded to a minute ago, means that an adult man like me can hear that and can kind of shrug it off and laugh it off. But when that is applied to boys and young men who haven't developed, who aren't mature, and who don't even necessarily know how to handle that or respond to it, that's going to have tremendous effects on their well-being and on their sense of self. And what a lot of boys and young men today are basically told is that they are less than girls. They are less than women. And they need to either be more like girls and women, or they need to even become girls and women. And what I'm trying to say in this new book, The War on Men, is that is exactly the wrong move. What we need to do, instead of telling boys and young men not to be strong, is to tell them in God to be strong, to grow up, to mature, and to change by God's grace.
Absolutely. Well, so what in the midst of all this is you're trying specifically right now, and all of us in our own different ways, trying to call men back to masculinity, back of being the person God created them to be in the midst of all this gender confusion that we're facing these days. What are some of the major misconceptions, shall we say, or maybe misunderstandings of masculinity, things that maybe you point out in the book that would be helpful?
Sure. You've got, for example, the American Psychological Association saying in a 2019 report that being aggressive, assertive, taking risks, being emotionally tough, all of that is part of traditional masculinity ideology, which is harmful and bad for men. And what you have to do, Jody, when you hear reports like this is say, with all due respect, that is nonsense, because men need to be trained to be assertive, aggressive, take risks, and be emotionally tough in certain settings. Can men not be as emotionally developed as they should be? Absolutely. Does the Bible call men to be understanding toward their wife in 1 Peter 3, for example? Yes. So every man is in a lifelong project of learning to be kinder and gentler and these sorts of things. But here's the thing. The Bible also says to men that we need to be tough. We need to act like men. 1 Corinthians 16:13. David says to his son Solomon, be strong and show yourself a man. 1 Kings 2:2. So the Bible says that to men, and men need to hear it, and we need to help boys hear that call well and live it out by God's grace.
Yeah, we really do. I love what you're doing, Owen, and all this. You know, the definition you just gave, let me just go down this path. The definition of masculinity that you just gave, a biblical definition, really is swimming upstream from society's definition. Kind of just briefly explain the difference. What would be society's definition of masculinity?
Honestly, I don't think society really has a definition of masculinity that's operative anymore, other than maybe men in some cases have a vague responsibility to love women and children. But beyond that, Jody, I'm not comfortable saying anything that our culture would believe in and emphasize in a hard and fast way. Our culture and society wants boys and men to leave behind their innate wiring, their God-given traits. It tells boys and men that those traits are antisocial. In response, our culture says, by the way, girls have social tendencies. Girls listen well. Girls are empathetic. Girls are inclusive. They bring people in. And so, for example, in the business world, there's now been several years of this model of the inclusive and empathetic CEO, who isn't like the old patriarchal CEO who makes decisions and runs the meeting on a rope. But no, this CEO is inclusive and brings everybody in. There's all sorts of ways that men can listen well and as I say, be warm and welcoming. But fundamentally, we're not calling men to be women. We're not calling men to be boys. We're calling boys to be men. But to even say that kind of line today is going to put you in the cultural penalty box. We can't worry about that, though. We have to call boys to men, or else this whole project we're in, it's all coming down.
I could not agree with you more. I think that's well said. And really, I guess when it comes down to it, society's definition would probably include some attempt of feminizing men these days. And of course, the outcome of that has no good end. I know that you're aware of Riley Gaines, former collegiate swimmer who competed against a man in the NCAA swimming championship. And as you well know, she recently spoke at our Pray Vote Stand Summit. And there was a point that she made that I'd really love for you to comment on. If we can, let's play clip 4, please.
There's no doubt in my mind we're in the part of the process now where weak men have created hard times. I think the last time we had a society full of strong men is in the 1940s during World War II, when men were lying about their age to enlist in the draft. And now we have men lying about their sex to get into women's sports.
Oh, what a contrast. Give me your response to that.
That was fire. That's my technical theological response. That was some heat. She's throwing 1-on-2 on the radar gun. She's exactly right. Men now are trying to get into women's sports. In my native state of Maine, there's been a lot of news recently about a cross-country runner, of all things, who's now used to compete in the guys' side and now is competing in the girls' side, and went from something like 172nd place on the men's side in the state to 4th on the girls' side. And what we just have to do as Christians, Jody, is we have to lead out, and we have to not leave it to the pundits out there who say some good things to take a stand here. We as Christians, we as Christian men have to stand up and say, no man should ever go into a girl's restroom like this man, William Thomas. He is not a woman. His name may be Leah Thomas technically, but he is a man, William Thomas, has done for girls. And no man should be competing against girls in these sports. And what we need to recover as men is that protector role among men. But so often when men show that protector instinct today, when men show strength of any kind, they're penalized for it. We want to shape the strength of our young men and boys. We want to train them in the gospel of Jesus Christ, but we absolutely are calling boys and men just like us who are weak in ourselves to be strong in God, and we're never going to stop calling that.
And just as you're saying, Owen, the battle here really goes far beyond just a sports issue. We're not just talking about men competing in women's sports or that type of thing. This is an attack on the character of God. This is an attack on the creation, the order, the roles, the complexity and differences of male and female, which ultimately are an attack on God itself. And that in itself indicates this is all driven demonically. It's driven by spiritual forces. This is much more than a sports issue, I guess is what I'm saying. How do you take that and communicate it effectively?
You're exactly right. And there's no way to communicate this outside of spiritual categories, Jody. We're not, as Christians, called to try to rationalize everything down for the broader public so that they'll listen to us and give us a hearing, because we're not really Christian when we talk in the public square. We can make great common sense arguments and arguments from sound thinking that we should and do. But fundamentally, we're Christians. We're not supposed to be a Christian on Sunday morning in how we talk, and then basically a functional unbeliever in how we talk on Wednesday. We're supposed to talk like a Christian on Sunday morning and Wednesday afternoon and Friday and everywhere in between. So what we need to do on this kind of issue is we need to say, I'm not just for boys being men and girls being women and not crossing between them or going into the opposite sex bathroom. I'm here as a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ. I know that God created this world, and I know that God didn't just create the dirt I walk on. God created men and God created women. There are only two sexes. There's only one vision of marriage. It's one man, one woman for life in ideal terms. And I'm standing for all of that. And I'm doing so explicitly because of God's inerrant word. And I'm here, furthermore, not to hate you. I'm not here to hate you. I'm here to speak the truth to you in love. And if you're trapped in this ideology, I'm here to bring you out by the grace of God. And I pray that God will do that for you.
Great point. This is not about hate. It's about truth. It's about reality, and reaching out to help people grasp that and understand it. It has to be the right approach, and understanding the spiritual nature of this whole thing as well. So what are some of the consequences of weak male leadership in society?
Well, you alluded to this a few minutes ago. Jordan Peterson has talked about it in a common sense kind of way. But when you tell people that we need a safer society, A, and then B, you tell them, so the way to get the safer society is to have men stop being toxic and strong. C, what you end up with is not in any way increased safety. You end up with increased danger. And so Peterson has been a voice against that. And he has said, in his own way, no, men need to be dangerous. Men being dangerous doesn't mean men going out and randomly attacking women and children. That's terrible from my Christian worldview and from his worldview. But men being dangerous means instead strength under control. It means that you have the capacity to defend yourself and to defend others when that is needed. You need to see yourself, if I can borrow this from the movies, as a sheepdog, as a man. You may not be the biggest, muscle-bound bench presser out there. I'm not. But you do take your God-given body in a 1 Corinthians 9:27 sense, and you subdue it, and you try to turn your body as much as you can into a weapon against evil. And you not only do that in a physical sense, you see that as your calling. That's why you're there. You're there to be a sheepdog. You're there to protect sheep against the wolves, because there's never going to be a way for you and me to be nice enough for the world to be absent of wolves. The only way you can face down wolves is to stand against them. And that's what men are called to do in the church and outside of it.
Incredible discussion. Oh, and unfortunately, the clock is ticking down. I want to play one more clip from Riley Gaines at the Pray Vote Stand Summit. Play clip 5, please.
We can only hope that these hard times garner strong men, but parents, as you're defending your daughters, teach your sons masculinity. Teach them to be strong men. Of course, teach them to uphold and respect and honor women, but teach them how to be strong men.
That's what you're just saying.
That is literally the message of my book, The War on Men. I hope to meet Riley Gaines at some point and talk with her, whether that happens or not. You're exactly right. I'm trying to do my small part. I'm publishing this book. I'm calling men to strength. It's not strength that comes from us. This isn't a self-fulfillment project. It's not self-help. It's not therapy. It's not the manosphere. It's not Joe Rogan. It's not Andrew Tate. It comes from God. It comes from Jesus Christ himself. And so that's the message, and that's the mission, to take men who aren't doing well in a lot of cases, men who aren't necessarily growing up, men who don't necessarily have a purpose or a script, and say, through the gospel of grace, you can become something greater than you are.
Dr. Owen Strachan, fantastic book. Where can people buy a copy of The War on Men?
The best place is still probably Amazon, despite all their mischief. So Amazon drives things, and that'd be a great place to go to get it, or Barnes & Noble, or one of those big box sellers out there.
Thank you so much for joining us on Washington Watch, and thank you for writing this incredible book. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.